Genesis study number 3 in our series, Preserving the Seed, Abraham's Oath for Isaac's Bride. In Genesis, we see God entering into a covenant with Abraham, promising him that his seed would not only become as numerous as the stars of heaven and as the sands of the sea, but that his descendants would have a divine mission. God has chosen his seed, Abraham's seed, to be a blessing to the world and as a force to destroy the plans of the evil one. And as we'll see shortly, the weight of the promise of this promise is going to rest upon Abraham's son Isaac and whom he marries. If he marries the wrong woman, it could jeopardize this divine covenant God made with Abraham. But Abraham, as we're going to see, is going to take action to be sure that this doesn't happen, an action that preserved the promise even unto this day. Okay? So let's get into it. Genesis chapter 24, verse 1 is where we're going to start off here. And it says, "And Abraham was old and well stricken in age, and the Lord had blessed Abraham in all things." Verse 2, "And Abraham said unto his eldest servant of his house, that ruled over all that he had, Put, I pray thee, thy hand under my thigh, and I will make thee swear by the Lord, the God of heaven and the God of the earth, that thou shalt not take a wife unto my son of the daughters of the Canaanites among whom I dwell." So what we can see here is a pretty serious moment in time here. Abraham making his servant solemnly swear that he will not take a wife, that he will not find a wife for Isaac of the daughters of the Canaanites. We'll come back to that here in a minute. We'll continue reading on. In verse 4, it says, "But thou shalt go unto my country and to my kindred, and take a wife unto my son Isaac." Now, as we know historically here, Abraham was called to leave. They left the land of Shinar, where he dwelt with his father. They went way up north, where like around Assyria, that area, way up north of the promised land. And then he goes down to the land of Canaan. So it's a very long journey from where he came from where his kindred, from the point where he left his kindred. And so he wants to send his servant, not just, hey, go find a wife for my son Isaac from some woman nearby. Abraham looked out at all the Canaanite women and for some reason thought that there was no chance that there would be anybody acceptable among the Canaanites to marry his son Isaac. So he goes all the way back to his, he wants his servant to go all the way back to find somebody from his homeland of his own kindred, of his own family, biological line, race, etc. Verse 5, "And the servant said unto him, Peradventure, the woman will not be willing to follow me unto this land. Must I needs bring thy son again unto the land from whence thou camest?" In other words, hey, if I go all the way down there without Isaac, if I take this, I don't even know if this is how many months this was, how long this would take to walk on foot. It was a long journey, okay? Long journey. So he says, what if I go all the way there and the woman says, no, I'm not coming back with you. I find the right woman for Isaac to marry and she says, no, I'm not coming. Should I come back and grab Isaac and then go back with Isaac? Okay, that would be logical, right? Take Isaac with you. It's kind of a lot to ask of a woman to come back to marry a man she's never met or seen, right? Verse 6, And Abraham said unto him, beware that thou bring not my son thither again. No doubt Abraham did not want his son to go on this journey because he feared for his safety, right? This is the promised heir to all of his blessings. Remember, it was in Isaac that the seed would be called, in Isaac that the covenant of Abraham would be passed on to, so on and so forth. So there was a lot at stake here for Abraham. He did not want to risk anything happening to Isaac, because all of those promises, all of those times that God came to Abraham and promised him that your descendants will be as numerous as the stars of heaven and as the sands of the sea. Your seed will possess the gate of all of its enemies. And all these other promises, they were all, in Abraham's eyes at least, all dependent upon Isaac. All of that weight of this promise was on this one son. Verse 7, the Lord God of heaven, which took me from my father's house and from the land of my kindred, separated him, which spake unto me, and that sware unto me, saying, unto thy seed. That's a biological family line, somebody's physical descendants. Unto thy seed will I give this land. He shall send his angel before thee, and thou shalt take a wife unto my son from thence. Now this is fascinating. This is fascinating, Jacob. Camera guy. This is fascinating in that Abraham trusted that God would send his angel to make sure the right woman was found for Isaac. I mean, this is a pretty big deal, right? It's a pretty big deal. We can even take this on the human level. If you're a Christian that either is from this biological family line, or you're adopted into this family line, you're adopted into the family of Abraham through Christ, it matters who you marry. Okay? It's a very important thing. If you're a child of the promise, if you're a person in covenant with God, it matters greatly who you yoke yourself to, right? Who you become one with. And God oftentimes, I have no doubt, organizes when somebody is in covenant with God. God will see to it that the right marriages take place. He will send his angel ahead to orchestrate or to make sure the union happens. Okay, fascinating. This will tie in later on when we talk about the preservation of the holy seed. Okay, it's not something that man necessarily orchestrates all by himself. God is the one that orchestrates it. You may have met somebody, or you may have gotten married and thought it was a complete accident, or thought it was your choice, when all along it could have been the angel of God making sure that seed was preserved and that you would meet that person and marry that person. All right. Fascinating that Abraham had this. What does this show? It shows that he has faith in the promises of God. He says, no, you don't need to take Isaac with you. God will send his angel. Verse 8, and if the woman will not be willing to follow thee, then thou shalt be clear from this thy oath, only bring not my son thither again. In other words, to his servant, if you try everything that you can and the woman doesn't come with you, you're free from this oath. It's not your fault. Verse 9, and the servant put his hand under the thigh of Abraham, his master, and sware to him concerning that matter. Now, evidently back in this day, putting your hand under the thigh of the person you're making a covenant or an oath to made that oath very solemn. Okay? Made it a solemn act. It wasn't just a normal promise. Oh yeah, I'll do this. When you put your hand under the thigh, it was basically a life or death matter that you've entered into. You will not violate that. Now, going back to this verse, every week we just kind of recently started this. We've done this in times past, but memory verses with our kids. I like to try to coincide or weave together our weekly homeschool lessons with our upcoming Bible study. And our plan here as of now is to let the memory verse kind of drive the topic, not only for their homeschooling week, but also for the upcoming study we're going to do together here on Sunday, so that we're kind of thinking about this. We're kind of thinking about this together as a family. We're kind of exploring this memory verse, this topic or this theme together. And then on Sunday, we put it all together. We put a cap on it and move on with a new one the next week, right? Just like we do with our studies. But here's the memory verse that we actually wrote this on we're going to write these memory verses on our deck door window every week, so that it's there all week long, so we can look at it, meditate upon it, and then use it again as a theme for our Sunday studies. But here is an actual picture of that memory verse that we wrote up there, enhanced digitally so that it's easier for you guys to read. And Jacob, you can come back to me. They can see that there. That was long enough. All right, thank you. But back to this memory verse here, or this verse. This is the theme. And I will make thee swear by the Lord, the God of heaven and the God of the earth, that thou shalt not take a wife unto my son of the daughters of the Canaanites among whom I dwell. So we're going to explore two things. We obviously know it was very important for Abraham that Isaac does not marry a Canaanite woman, to the point that he makes his servant not only put his hand under his thigh and make this oath, but swear by the Lord, not just the Lord. He could have left it at that, but then he enhances the oath by defining the Lord as the God of heaven and the God of the earth. Man, you don't get any more of a solemn oath than this. And its oath is connected with taking the right bride for Isaac. This was very important. You don't have too many oaths like this in the Bible. In fact, I don't know if there is any other oath quite like this in the Bible, where somebody had to swear like this. And so there are two primary reasons why I think why this is important, that Abraham not take a wife of the daughters of Canaan. Point number one, we'll explore first. We'll get to point number two in a bit. But point number one, for spiritual reasons, to protect the family line from idolatry and covenant compromise. In other words, covenant compromise means you're not going to start worshiping other gods. You're not going to violate the covenant. So it makes common sense. If the Canaanites were a bunch of idolaters, immoral people, which they were morally and spiritually corrupt. They worshiped Baal. They worshiped Asherah. They practiced child sacrifices. The temple prostitution was normal. So it was sexually immoral. They worshiped false gods. They were murdering their babies to these false gods. And so obviously you don't want your son to marry a woman like this, because it's going to corrupt your family's morality, the family line. And then what are the children going to be like? Are they going to be like their mom, or are they going to be like their dad? Is the dad going to stay in covenant with God, or is his wife going to pull him away into this filth? Well, Deuteronomy 7 verse 1 gives us evidence that for sure this oath had spiritual implications, okay? Don't corrupt the morals of the family line. And In Deuteronomy 7, verse 1, it says, this, when the Lord thy God shall bring thee into the land whither thou goest to possess it, and hath cast out many nations before thee, the Hittites, and the Girgashites, and the Amorites, and the Canaanites, and the Perizzites, and the Hivites, and the Jebusites, 7 nations greater and mightier than thou. So there's a list of all these people, right, that lived in the land of Canaan. 7 nations. Verse 2. Oops, went too far. And when the Lord thy God shall deliver them before thee, thou shalt smite them and utterly destroy them. Thou shalt make no covenant with them, nor show mercy unto them. Neither, now this is what we came here for, neither shalt thou make marriages with them. Thy daughter shalt thou not give unto his son, nor his daughter shalt thou give unto thy son. So when the Israelites were to go into the land of Canaan, there was a direct prohibition by God saying, you shall not let your sons or daughters marry these people. Why? Verse 4, for they will turn away thy son from following me, that they may serve other gods. So will the anger of the Lord be kindled against you and destroy thee suddenly. So had Abraham's son Isaac married a Canaanite woman, the odds are that she would have turned Isaac's heart away from God, and God would have had to have destroyed Isaac and his seed, which could not happen, right? Because God already made the promise. He said, in Isaac shall thy seed be called. That one line contained, if you would, the destiny and the future of planet Earth. And not only planet Earth, but even God's plan for the heavens, as we're going to see here. Very significant thing. When I say the heavens as well, that who Isaac married not only affected what was going to God's plan on earth, but also in heaven. Now you can see why Abraham made his servant swear by not just the God of the earth, but the God of heaven. It's not just, sometimes you think, well, he's just saying it for emphasis. I don't think it was just for emphasis. I think it does put a lot of emphasis on this oath, but this oath has both earthly and heavenly implications, okay? Obviously, number one, the seed from whom the ultimate seed of the woman that would come through Isaac would be the Lord Jesus Christ, who would become the king of not only the earth, but the ruler of the heavens. Verse 5, but thus shall you deal with them. You shall destroy their altars and break down their images and cut down their groves and turn their graven images and burn their graven images with fire. Okay. So obviously multiculturalism and diversity were not something in God's playbook for God's people. Okay. It was not something they were to practice. Verse 6, for thou art an holy people unto the Lord thy God. Holy means pure, morally, and as we're going to explore, potentially, there was a seed line aspect to this as well. Morally pure and physically pure. For thou art an holy people unto the Lord thy God. The Lord thy God hath chosen thee to be a special people unto himself, above all people that are upon the face of the earth. You know, a lot of times people say, well, God doesn't play favorites. He doesn't do well, he does have a chosen people, right? A people that have been given a divine mission to be a blessing unto the entire world. And the one thing that would stop them from becoming a blessing unto the world is for that seed to become unholy, for that holy seed to become unholy and or corrupt, both spiritually, number one, and physically. Verse 11, observe that thou I'm sorry. We're done with Deuteronomy. Now we're going to go over to another place to back up this point that marrying these women, these Canaanite women, could potentially have disastrous effects. Verse 11, observe thou that which I command thee this day. Behold, I drive out before thee the Amorite and the Canaanite and the Hittite and the Perizzite and the Hivite and the Jebusite. Take heed to thyself, lest thou make a covenant with the inhabitants of the land, whither thou goest, lest it be for a snare in the midst of thee. In other words, what does he talk about? He's talking about covenant here. Don't make sacred agreements with these pagans, with these idolaters. Why? Well, you can't, there's many places in the New Testament that tell us you can't serve God and Belial at the same time, or serve God and Satan at the same time. You'll love one or hate the other. So it's just a natural thing. You can't have dual allegiances. Okay? You either are going to serve God or you're going to serve Satan. You get that choice. You don't get to do a little bit of both. And a lot of people try to do both, and it just doesn't happen. We call them worldly Christians, right? Christians who think that it doesn't matter who I marry. Oh, a lot of Christians will do this. They'll say, well, I'm just going to find the prettiest wife I can find or the most handsome husband. After we get married, I know he's really worldly right now or she's really worldly, but I'm going to change them. I'm going to marry them first based off their looks, and then I'm going to change their heart afterwards so that, I can kind of have the best of both worlds. And then most often that doesn't happen, right? I'm not saying it hasn't been successful for some people, but most often what happens is compromise, okay? Compromise. The worldly person that the godly person marries is really into all these worldly things, and they keep pushing them on the godly person. And what happens? Compromise after compromise. Oh, I don't want to fight about this. I don't want to fight about that. I'm going to give in on this, give in on that. And next thing you know, the holy seed is now worshiping at the altar of the unholy seed. Okay. So, I could translate this to today again. Take heed to thyself, lest thou celebrate diversity and multiculturalism. Okay. And if we just ignore the actual seed aspect of this, right, that we're going to talk about in a little bit, because and just look at this from a spiritual standpoint, mixing cultures is not something that you don't want to have a pagan culture and a Christian culture, because Christian culture is not going to survive in that aspect if you accept it. If you got Christians living in a pagan culture, if the Christians have the mindset of we're going to conquer paganism by spreading the light of the gospel, that's different, right? But if you're just coexisting to coexist and not attempting to evangelize, you're gonna end up compromising. I could even say it this way: if you don't evangelize, you're going to compromise. Okay? If you're not going on offense for the kingdom of God, trying to win souls for Christ, you're going to be slowly yourself falling into the pits of paganism. All right? And so that was something that God did not want to happen. That's why he said, don't make a covenant with these people. But you shall do what? You shall destroy their altars, break down their images, and cut down their groves. Now today, in today's sense, right, how does this apply to a Christian living in America? Well, you destroy the false ideologies of multiculturalism and diversity, and it's so great that we have mass immigration into America. All these other we should just be open-minded to all this. Okay? Because what's going to happen if you don't destroy these false ideologies, these false gods and paganism will come into your country and they will attempt to destroy Christianity. Is that not what's happening in America today? It's obviously what is happening in America today. It is the battle we are in. And the reason America has fallen so deeply into paganism today is because people don't understand or take seriously not only their destiny as God's people, right? Chosen to be a special people above all people, to be a blessing to all people. But they haven't taken serious the oath that Abraham made and these other commands in the Bible of preserving your family's culture and heritage. They have not taken that seriously, and therefore it's no secret why America. If somebody wants to say, what happened to America? Well, it's very simple. We celebrate other gods. Okay? We sacrifice our children to Molech. We call it abortion. We call it Planned Parenthood. That's what we do. That's why we are that's how we got to where we're at today. For thou shalt worship no other God, for the Lord, whose name is jealous, is a jealous God. Okay? Jealous meaning God does not like it when his people decide to flirt with other gods or commit idolatry with other gods. Verse 15, lest thou make a covenant with the inhabitants of the land, and they go a-whoring after their gods, and do sacrifice unto their gods, and one call thee, and thou eat of his sacrifice. Okay? God says, you need to destroy all these altars, you need to destroy all these false religions and ways, because if you don't, what's going to happen is you're going to go a-whoring after their gods. That's what this is all about. So number one, to kind of recap a little bit where we're at, why did Abraham not want Isaac to marry a Canaanite woman? Because he didn't want Isaac and his grandchildren and great-grandchildren to be worshiping false gods. Abraham was in a covenant with God. And he didn't want his seed being sacrificed to devils. Okay? He didn't want his seed being aborted. And he didn't want you to be in a situation where you're living in a land where one would call to thee and say, hey, you want to come eat of our pagan sacrifice today? You want to come join us over here, join us over there? I could even say, you want to come to our open door church today? One call you, evangelize you to paganism? Verse 16, and thou shalt take of their daughters. If you don't do what I command you to do, you're going to end up taking of their daughters unto thy sons, and their daughters go a-whoring after their gods, and make thy sons go a-whoring after their gods. All right? Pretty serious. You marry somebody who's into paganism, you're going to go whoring after false gods. That's why it's so important today is, number one, marry a Christian. Be equally yoked, right? Verse 22, thou shalt not lie. In the book of Leviticus, it talks about there were these holiness laws, right? God told the Israelites what foods they should eat to keep their physical body pure from defilement, keep them healthy, perhaps even prevent by eating the proper diet, perhaps even preventing their DNA from being corrupted or altered. Okay. Thou shalt not lie with mankind as with womankind. It is an abomination. Okay. Homosexuality, lesbian, they're both abominations in God's eyes. And I'm going to bring this up. I'm just going to go back to this point here. If I was Satan, right? What If I knew that there was this covenant made with Abraham, that his seed would be as numerous as the stars of heaven and as the sands of the sea, and that his seed would be a blessing unto the world, and that his seed would conquer the forces of evil by controlling the gates of their enemy, they would be bringing forth the testimony of the gospel, they would bring forth the Christ child, and all this stuff, right? What would I do if I was Satan? What would I do? Well, I'd number one say it's not important that your culture stay a godly culture. Number one, I would say it doesn't matter who you are. It doesn't matter what your heritage is. It doesn't matter who your forefathers were. It doesn't matter that Abraham was your forefather, because I'd want you to forget that you were in covenant, right? I'd want you to forget that. And then what I would try to do before I try to just kill you, if I don't have the power to do that, I would try to get you to marry pagan women and pagan husbands, because I could just destroy that promise that God made with Abraham by changing the culture of that seed line. Okay. And also, I could also destroy this promise by saying children are not important. You shouldn't worry about having a lot of children. Worry more about your career than children. Okay. And then I would do this. I would make homosexuality and lesbianism cool things, because we know you can't procreate, right? 2 men, 2 women. So what we see here, these are all by design, right? It's an abomination because it's a disgusting, filthy act, right, in God's eyes for that to happen. But it goes even further than that. It prohibits the promised seed from being born. It tells God, so that's what I would do. If I was Satan, that would be the first thing I would do before I would then try to attack outwardly the woman's seed, right? The family of God, the children of Abraham. I wouldn't just try to kill all the children of Abraham. I would first just try to make them marry pagans, make them forget their identity, make them forget who they were. And then I don't have an enemy to fight, right? I just changed all of God's promises simply by putting a scantily dressed Canaanite woman in front of Isaac and saying, "Oh, Isaac, wouldn't you like to be with me tonight?" That's all I'd have to do, right? Pretty easy, if it works, right? Neither shalt thou lie down with any beast to defile thyself therewith. Neither shall any woman stand before a beast to lie down thereunto. It is confusion. Okay, so the pagans here actually defiled themselves with animals. And for the deeper student, when you look at the different, you look at how Adam was placed in the Garden of Eden, how God had no man to tend the Garden of Eden, and then you see that on the 6th day, God made a bunch of different, not only animals, but potentially other beings with living souls in them. Okay, living souls in them. This verse could apply on a deeper level with that understanding in mind. Verse 24, defile not ye yourselves in any of these things, for in all these the nations are defiled, which I cast out before you. Okay, don't defile yourself with any of these things that all these guys are doing, right? Verse 26, you shall therefore keep my statutes and my judgments, and shall not commit any of these abominations, neither any of your own nation, nor any stranger that sojourneth among you. Now let's talk about this for a minute. God says, you shall keep my statutes and my judgments. One blessing that the children of Abraham have blessed the world with is the law of God, decency, morality. That's why Western civilization, the Western Christian nations, many people say the West, that was, some people say the white Christian nations, right? The reason they were such a blessing unto the world is because they held deeply, they stayed away from paganism, right? They promoted law and order. Law and order. And where did that law and order come from? From the laws of God. In fact, when you look at the law books of ancient America, I shouldn't say ancient America, early America, around the time of, from 1776 forward and even before, you'll find out that most all of the laws on the books stated a law and then cited a scriptural, a verse, cited a verse. So you'd say, thou shalt not murder. And it would say Exodus chapter 20, verse whatever, or Deuteronomy this. Thou shalt not commit adultery. And it would say these things, right? It would cite verses. Use the Bible as the foundation. The Bible was the foundation of Western civilization and its laws. And not pagan laws, not what you'd find in other countries, not what you'd find in Asia, not what you would find in Africa, not what you would find in other parts of the world. Even in ancient America. Leviticus 18 verse 27, for all these abominations have the men of the land done which were before you, and the land is defiled. The land spew not you out also when you defile it, as it spewed out the nations that were before you. I mean, literally sin, these abominable sins that God mentioned here that the Israelites were not to do. You're not to promote, there's not to be homosexuality. There's not to be bestiality. There's to be this preservation of, kind after kind in all these things. He says, if you defile that, if you do those things, you're actually contaminating the earth below your feet. And the earth itself will spew you out. Now, how does that happen? How about plagues, right? Plagues often come from the earth. Some kind of a rat can pick up some kind of germ on the ground, transfer it to humans. Now the earth, it transfers from the earth to the rat to the humans. And now all of a sudden we have huge plagues and people are dying and people are being spewed out for their sins. So that happens. Plagues do happen as a result of grotesque abominations. Leviticus 18:29 says, for whosoever shall commit any of these abominations, even the souls that commit them, shall be cut off from among their people. Now think about this. As we get ready to transition over to physical purity, preservation of the physical line of Abraham. What physical things, detriments, I'm trying to think of a bigger fancy word. That doesn't help either. And what physical defilements, I use that word, what potential physical defilements could happen as the result of homosexuality, bestiality, even down to the point of eating things that you're not supposed to eat. Could those things actually defile the flesh in a way that could not only defile your flesh, right, with some kind of a disease, a gene mutation, this or that, but once that happens, what we know from biology is that contaminations or alterations of DNA or genes or whatever, that can now be passed on to your children. So think about this. If a nation is just morally corrupt and committing these abominations, what is that doing to that line from a biological standpoint? Is it changing the image of God? Is it changing that pure, Adam was made in the image of God, right? Do those defilements slowly and incrementally defile that image that we were made in? I think it probably does. That's why God talks about the souls that commit those things will be cut off from among those people. Why? Because if people are doing those things and then they're marrying and having children with other people, they're spreading that contamination to others, if probably from a biological standpoint as well. Leviticus 18 verse 30, it says, "Therefore shall you keep mine ordinances, mine ordinance, that you commit not any of these abominable customs which were committed before you, and that you defile not yourselves therein. I am the Lord your God." Now, why I brought in the physical stuff is not only because we're going to transition over to that potentially being another reason why Abraham did not want Isaac to marry a Canaanite, because he didn't want his physical biological family line to be defiled, but also because in this chapter of Leviticus, it's not just speaking morally and spiritually. There were commands in kind of the theme of this command was that the Israelites remain holy and pure from a physical standpoint. There was even scriptures that said they told them what kind of clothes to wear and stuff like that, because certain kind of fabrics mixed together could be harmful to your body. So just go on in your own time, go back and read Leviticus 18 from the first verse onwards, and you'll see that most of these commands were commands to keep Israel pure and holy from a physical standpoint, their flesh from being contaminated. Otherwise, because, like if you eat certain foods in this list that you're told not to eat of, it's not really harming you spiritually. It's defiling your body. It's corrupting your body with unhealthy things. All right. To wrap up point number 1, we'll go to 2 Corinthians 6, verse 14. Everybody can agree on this point. If you're a Christian, you can agree on everything we've talked about thus far as, you don't want to marry a Canaanite or a non-Christian woman for obvious spiritual and cultural reasons, right? 2 Corinthians 6, verse 14 says, "Be ye not unequally yoked together with unbelievers, for what fellowship hath righteousness with unrighteousness? And what communion hath light with darkness?" Okay? You don't want to be unequally yoked. Christians don't want to be yoked together with pagans for the obvious reason, right? Obvious reasons. Most every Christian can agree on that. But where there's a divide is when we take this on a physical level. Most Christians have this, it's kind of an easy way out, right? It's an easy way out because everybody accepts it. If we spiritualize everything, it's not really that controversial, okay? It's not really that controversial. But point number 2, if we say part of the reason why Abraham did not want Isaac to marry a Canaanite is because he wanted to keep his seed line pure, that's controversial today. Because now people are saying, well, this kind of sounds like racism to me, or this, I can't, the world doesn't touch this. And so as a Christian, I don't want to touch it either, because I don't want to be labeled as some kind of a bigot or something like that, right? So point number 2, which I think goes even deeper. Preservation, the reason of the prohibition of Isaac marrying a Canaanite was for the preservation of the pure seed line, guarding the holy line of promise, okay? What verses would suggest this? Well, let's go to a few. Genesis chapter that would suggest a protecting that line from a physical, biological standpoint, not corrupting the image of God, if you would. And God said unto Abraham, Genesis 21, verse 12, "Let it not be grievous in thy sight because of the lad, and because of thy bondwoman," because he's going to kick the bondwoman out. And Sarah said, I don't want this bondwoman around anymore. And God says, don't be heartbroken about all this. It's going to be okay. "In all that Sarah has said unto thee, hearken unto her voice. For in Isaac shall thy seed be called. Now, if this was purely a spiritual thing, right? If this was purely a spiritual seed line, it's only if you believe you're part of this seed. We know that that's a part of it. You can be adopted into this family spiritually. But if there was no physical reason, then why would God, no physical reason to preserve the seed, then why would God not just allow the promised seed, all the promises to go through Ishmael? Hagar, whose mother was Hagar. Okay? God didn't choose Hagar. Why didn't he? Now you got to ask yourself these questions, right? Why didn't God choose Hagar? One could say, well, because she was a bondwoman, right? She was a slave. Well, you could try to make that case. One could also make the case that maybe there was something different about Sarah's genes than Hagar. There was some kind of a biological difference there. And God, in order to preserve the seed, knew that Sarah's line was still pure. And to carry forth that pure line made in the image of God, this promise had to go through Ishmael, not through Hagar. Okay? In Isaac shall thy seed be called. I'm sorry, in Isaac, yeah, not Ishmael. Okay? Then we go further on into the book of Ezra. And I think we have another point that causes us to think, well, are there some biological reasons to this? It says this, now when, Ezra 9 verse 1, now when these things were done, the princes came to me saying, the people of Israel and the priests and the Levites have not separated themselves from the people of the lands, doing according to their abominations, even the Canaanites, the Hittites, the Perizzites, the Jebusites, the Ammonites, the Moabites, the Egyptians, and the Amorites. For they have taken, this is what we came here for they have taken of their daughters for themselves and for their sons, so that the holy seed have mingled themselves with the people of those lands. Yea, the hand of the princes and the rulers hath been chief in this trespass. So here we have something called the holy seed. Holy means pure, undefiled, uncontaminated. If you were to look at this from a DNA aspect, their DNA had not been altered or changed from the original plan, from the original image that Adam was created in, right? All right. The hand of the princes. Now, what we found out what happened later on, and I don't think I have those verses. I'll read verse 3 and then we'll recap what happens in the rest of this chapter. And when I had heard this thing, I rent my garment. This is Ezra, when he found out that the rulers were marrying these foreign women. He rent his garment and his mantle and plucked off the hair of his head and of my beard and sat down astonished. So here we have Abraham taking this oath, right? I want you to swear by heaven and earth that you will not find a Canaanite wife for my son Isaac. Now later on, we still have this same mentality going on, right? The preservation of the holy seed, where Ezra, the priest of God, hears that they are mingling the holy seed, and he literally tears apart rips his clothes, yanks out his own hair off his head and his beard. I mean, that's pretty serious, right? That's an emotional response. Today, unfortunately, what you would say is, well, Ezra, if you're a modern day Christian today, you'd say, well, Ezra was kind of a right wing. He was kind of extreme. He was maybe a little bit bigoted. He wasn't understanding of other cultures. He didn't celebrate diversity and multiculturalism and open borders and all those kinds of things, right? Obviously, these things would have been farthest from Ezra's mind, okay? So why do we keep finding these things in the Bible that are totally different than what we're told are holy today? We're taught that multiculturalism, diversity, we're taught that these things are holy. Okay? And they're not, right? But so if you were to read on and finish read on in Ezra chapter 9, and I think in chapter 10 as well, it was a pretty severe like Ezra didn't just say, well, make sure after you committed these sins by marrying these Canaanites, these other foreign women, make sure that the wives convert to Christianity and convert to, well, Christianity is the Old Testament, but convert to the covenant of God, convert to the ways of Abraham. And make sure your children are taught the laws of God, right? He didn't say that. Do you know what he ended up doing? They were forced to send both their wives and their children away. That's pretty severe, right? If it was just a spiritual thing, right, you would say, just convert the wives, convert the children, and we're all good. It doesn't matter that they were from the Canaanites or the Hittites. It doesn't matter. If that were the case, you could just evangelize them and make sure that this worked out okay, or at least hope, or give them the choice. But there was no choice given to them. There was no chance saying, well, ask your wives if they'll convert to the ways of God or not. There was no choice in that. It was the only way we fix this is you got to send them away. You got to send them away. That was pretty severe, right? Pretty severe. And in today's age, with forgiveness that's in Christ, perhaps if that sin was committed or whatever, God has a way of mending that up that was not able to be mended before, okay? All right, Isaiah chapter 6, verse 9, as we get close to making our final points here. In the book of Isaiah, he says this, God says this to him, and to the prophet, and he said, go and tell this people, hear ye indeed, and understand not, and see ye indeed, but perceive not. So he's telling them, I want you to go and give them this message, but they're not gonna understand what you're saying. Make the heart of this people fat, and make their ears heavy, and shut their eyes, and lest they see with their eyes and hear with their ears and understand with their heart and convert and be healed. Do you know that most of the deepest, most obvious, most significant truths in the Bible are things that people won't accept, they cannot accept, because there's this callousness there. There's something, some kind of a blindness, a brainwashing, a conditioning that makes it so they can't hear it. These truths that are so important to God are also so radically offensive to the world and even the so-called nominal Christian, right? The Christian who has one foot in the world, one foot out, or the Christian that just spiritualizes everything, right? The Christian that just wants, the Christian that wants to make a stand for the truth, but make sure it's only the easy way, right? I mean, if you're condemned for standing against homosexuality, I'll take that. I'll take that. But if somebody's going to start calling me a racist or an anti-Semite or this or that, that's too much for me. I'm not going to make that bold of a stand, right? So there are truths in the Bible, many of them, deeper ones, that we are to proclaim that many people will not hear, like Isaiah was told to proclaim. Then said I, O Lord, how long? And he answered, until the cities be wasted and without inhabitant, and the houses without man, and the land be utterly desolate. And the Lord have removed men far away, and there be a great forsaking in the midst of the land. In other words, Isaiah, you keep telling the truth. They're not going to listen to you. They're not going to hear. But you're going to do it until all of this happens, right? Till I bring an end to all this. But then he says something very interesting here in verse 13. He says, but yet in it. Okay, there's going to be all these blind people, right? All these people you're going to tell the truth to, but they have ears, but they can't hear. They have eyes, but they can't see. But yet in it shall be a tenth. What is a tenth? A tenth is symbolic of a remnant, right? A precious remnant. And it shall return and shall be eaten as a teal tree and as an oak whose substance is in them. When they cast forth their leaves, so the holy seed, there's that word holy seed again. The holy seed shall be the substance thereof. Okay, so he promises Isaiah that there would be this remnant. This remnant would be that holy seed that would remain pure and undefiled until the very end. And you know what's fascinating is you get to the book of Revelation, and we do see that. In Revelation chapter 12, we see that there is a remnant of the woman's seed who, in other places, they're called the 144,000, 12,000 from each tribe, that the dragon hates. Okay? Not only because of her, number one, the dragon, as we see in Revelation 12, hates the remnant of the woman's seed because they're of the woman. They're of that biological family line. Okay? And this remnant of the woman's seed in the book of Revelation is separate from the great multitudes in Revelation 7 of all nations, of all kindreds, of all tribes, of all these people from all over the world that have become believers in Christ. In the book of Revelation, there's two groups of believers. There's the remnant of the woman's seed, okay, that covenant that God made with Abraham in that biological covenant. And then there's those converts from all the other nations that are not biological, they're not of the biological seed, but by the grace and mercy of God have been adopted into that family, even if they came from the Canaanites, the Hittites, or whatever. They can all be a part of this family, but there is a distinct difference. One line, I lost connection there. Now I got it back. One line has a God-given destiny to perform a certain thing, okay? And the other line is basically, you figure more free will, right? One line, if you would be the priests of the world, the evangelizers, those people that would bring the Bible, the gospel to the nations of the world, like Western Europe and America has done, right? We have brought, our missionaries from our churches in our lands have brought the message of Jesus to Africa, to Asia, to India, and all over the place, right? So there's two distinct groups in the Bible. There's Israel, and then there's the Gentiles still, right? But it all stems from the promise made, the first prophecy of the Bible, and it reads Genesis 3:15. After the serpent seduced Eve, he says this, and I will put enmity between thee and the woman, and between thy seed and her seed. It shall bruise thy head, and thou shalt bruise his heel. Okay? So God said there would be this woman's seed line, a biological family line, that would be at war with this other biological family line, the serpent seed, and that the woman's seed would eventually conquer the serpent seed. Now, there are all these other nations and peoples that are not a part of either seed. They're not a part of the woman's seed or the serpent seed, right? And they're the ones that each seed is fighting for. If you really want to understand the Bible, that's what this is all about. There are two seed lines fighting for converts. The woman seed's trying to bring people to Christ. The serpent seed's trying to bring all the peoples, all the Gentiles, and all the peoples to the Antichrist. That's what this is all about. That's every page of the Bible from beginning to end stems around this, hinges off this truth, yet most Christians don't even know this verse. Literally, if you know one verse in the Bible, this probably ought to be the verse that you know. When someone say, well, John 3:16 should be the verse. Well, you don't understand John 3:16 unless you understand Genesis 3:15, my friends. John 3:16 has no meaning without Genesis 3:15. All right. Now I'm going to say this. Some would point out that the physical, biological thing means nothing now, especially since the New Testament's here and all that. We're all children of Abraham if we believe in Christ, which is true in terms of salvation, right? But so we read Genesis 3:15, we see that there is this seed line of the woman, and we have these genealogies in the Bible. You have them in the Old Testament going all the way to the New Testament. And the main purpose of those genealogies is to show that Jesus was a direct descendant of Adam, okay? Through Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, and through David, right? So there's these genealogies in the Bible. What are they here for if there's no biological significance to them, if everything's spiritual? Well, there wouldn't be genealogies because they wouldn't matter. If everything's spiritual, just cut out the physical genealogies because they don't matter, right? Well, they're there, and they're in the New Testament. And some would point out that, well, you know what? In Jesus's family line, there are Canaanites. Okay? And you went, whoa, that doesn't sound right, right? Tamar was a Canaanite. Rahab was a Canaanite. Remember, when they went into the land, was a Canaanite. And one could argue, well, they lived among the Canaanites. They weren't Canaanites, and that's potentially the case. Could have been. Ruth was a Moabite. These were Gentiles. Bathsheba may also have been had a Gentile connection, being that her husband was a Hittite. So we have Tamar, Rahab, Ruth, and Bathsheba, supposedly in the royal line of Jesus Christ. But you know what? When you dig a little bit deeper, I think these Gentiles being included in the family line give us a beautiful truth, and that is that through God's mercy and grace, He can accept the Canaanite and the Moabite and the Hittites into the kingdom of God. They can be grafted into the kingdom of God. But you know what? Luke chapter 3. So that's Matthew chapter 1, where these Gentiles are in Jesus' so-called genealogy. Did you know that's not actually Jesus' genealogy? Matthew chapter 1 is Joseph's genealogy. Well, we all know that Joseph was the stepfather of Jesus, not the biological father. But then you go to Luke chapter 3, which is Mary's biological family line, and guess what? You do not find any Gentiles, non-Israelites, non-woman seed in her family line. Stating this, that Luke 3 documents that there was, that when you look at Matthew chapter 1 and Luke chapter 3, you see that there is both a spirit, because these Gentiles were good women, right? They ended up being converts before they were grafted into Joseph's genealogy, the stepfather of Jesus. So with these two genealogies literally tell the truth that I'm trying to bring forth today. there is a spiritual importance to preserving the spiritual seed, of which these Canaanite or these Gentile women were spiritual seed children of Abraham that got grafted into the family. But there's also the biological pure line that leads to Jesus. And he was not, his DNA, I have a firm belief that his DNA was holy and pure, just like Noah's was, who was a type of Christ. We find that Noah, it even says that God destroyed the earth that was because they had intermixed with the fallen angels. The DNA of mankind had become so corrupt, and only Noah was left, that he was the only human left, the only descendant of Adam, with a perfect pedigree, meaning his DNA was not contaminated. Fascinating when you think about it. So I truly believe that both of these reasons matter. Both of these reasons were in Abraham's heart. Do not marry a Canaanite, because I don't want you to corrupt the line spiritually, and I don't want you to corrupt the line physically, okay? And Jesus would have been that pure and holy seed that the Lord was, that the Lord had in his plan to become a blessing unto the entire world. With that said, we'll take questions and comments. Do we have any? No questions or comments. Did I go live? I went live. Okay. All right. I was afraid. The last couple weeks ago, or I forgot to go live. But all right. Do we have any questions or comments in here? Okay. Well, I guess my job is easy today. We just want to thank everybody for joining. Oh, go ahead.
Cheryl Pearson says, how do you know if you're of the pure biological line?
I would say we don't know. And my answer to that would be the most important thing is our faith in Christ, right? Because everybody can become a child of Abraham in the spiritual sense. And so that's salvation's open to everybody. So the danger that we don't want to fall into is worrying too much about that. I think I don't know all the reasons for the physical purity aspect of this, of what that contains. I do know this. We pass on our traits to our children, right? When you look at the Western Christian civilization, something different happened here, right? Something different happened here that didn't happen in Asia, that didn't happen in India, that didn't happen. And in large part, it was that the gospel was our spiritual foundation, right? The word of God. But also God gives everybody, you can say all peoples, various gifts and talents. And I feel like that this woman's seed, the pure biological woman's seed, had those natural God-given abilities and talents in them that were necessary for them to complete the mission. Whether that was to have a very logical mind to apply the laws of God to society, right? To have the kind of mind that would care for animals and the earth. To have this creativity that Western civilization has been known to have. Creativity, being able to use their creativity to invent things, to create civilizations that would make different inventions that would be a blessing to other peoples around the world. And so I think that those things, we know our biological traits are passed on down to descendants to descendants. So the next question someone would ask is, well, what was different about this biological line the biological line of Christ than that of other biological lines? Why did it matter? And I think it has to do with those characteristic traits. Even, some even go into physical stature, that the Israelites are, on average, a strong, industrious people that can, build things, right? Physically capable of doing that, right? And it could go on and so on and so forth. But what we do know, going back to her question, is I don't think we do know, but I think when we read Revelation chapter 12, there is a divine destiny upon a remnant of believers in America, those people that were descendants of Americans in Europe, that have this calling to stand against the dragon, right? I feel like if you were born with this natural inclination to put your foot on the head of the serpent, you want to defeat evil, and it's just in your DNA, so to speak, chances are you're probably of that biological seed line, versus if you're just maybe somebody that realizes they're a sinner in need of a savior and you just want to be saved from the clutches of Satan. I could almost define it as this. You were born, if you're of the pure biological seed line, you were born to fight. Okay? And how do I say that? Well, Genesis 3:15. Woman's seed had one specific main destiny, and that was to defeat the serpent. Like, I think if you wake up every day thinking, how am I going to defeat Satan, that serpent, you're probably of that pure biological line. Now, I think there are the kings and queens of the ethnic peoples, the non-Israelite peoples, who love their people and want to honor God and honor his commandments. And I think some of those there are elect of those, the kings and queens of the ethnic peoples, are chosen for those, for that reason as well. Because you have Cyrus as an example of that. He was a Gentile, right? Cyrus the Persian, that was named before he was even born and was given the destiny of bringing God's people back to the Holy Land to rebuild the city walls and the temple. And so, I don't know. I don't think there's a way that we can necessarily know for sure biologically. I think it's more of an inner feeling. You just kind of know what your destiny is or your purpose. And if your purpose is just to love God and love others and spread the gospel, there's nothing wrong with that, right? There's nothing wrong with it. Just as, like, you look at God made everything kind after kind, right? I don't look at a lion and say, the lion's no good because it's a lion, right? I look at a lion and I say, that's an amazing creature that God has made. It's not like me, right? It's totally different than me. But man, that thing's fierce, it's strong, it's majestic looking. It's even used as the emblem of Christ, a lion, right? It's even used as a symbol of his power and his might. So I think what Satan tries to do, and what we want to be careful of not doing, is creating envies between class. If you feel like you're one of the woman's seed, and you're one of and you feel like I probably have a clean biological line going back to Adam, it's not something you want to gloat over. But it's something that, why do I bring it up in this study then? Well, Pastor Ben, you bring it up, you're going to create class divisions among Christians. You're going to create this division of the biological family line and the spiritual family line. And no, that's not what it's about. Okay? The point is there are truths in the Bible that are truths that need to be known. Now, why would somebody need to know they're of that pure biological line? Well, it's an awakening. It's, oh my gosh, this is who I am. This was who my forefathers were. They sent missionaries out to other countries. They were Bible scholars. They did all this. Now I feel alive that I have a destiny and a purpose to fulfill. And now I know I have to do what they're doing, what they did. I want to do what they did because I want to live out my calling. Okay? It's all about living out your calling, living out your destiny, not to say we're biological, so we're more important. And that debate was already finished, if you would, by the New Testament church. Because if you remember, there was a Gentile church and then there was the Judaic church, right? The Israelite church. And there was arguments, do the Gentile Christians need to follow all these laws and health laws and all that? And what's interesting is the health laws, as far as what they eat and everything, wasn't all that important for the Gentiles for some reason. We tied that in. It didn't seem to be all that important as it was to the Israelite. Why would that be? Well, we kind of touched on that earlier on in the study. So I know I'm kind of rambling. I hope that complete answer. Well, I could say this. We don't necessarily know for sure, but God does, because he literally calculates out 12,000 from each tribe of Israel, not just Judah, it's the Jews, but 12,000 from Simeon, 12,000 from Reuben, 12,000 from Gad, Issachar, and so forth. God literally says there are these people descended from these tribes that will live in the last days, and they're called the remnant of the woman's seed. Anything else? Any other points? All right. Well, we want to thank everybody for joining us. Until next time, stay in his word every single day so that you can be a Christian overcomer. God bless.
Christian Overcomers is brought to you by the tithes and offerings of our listeners. If you would like to support our ministry, please go to ChristianOvercomers.com. God bless you, and thank you for your support.
Mine eyes have seen the glory of the coming of the Lord. He is trampling out the vintage where the grapes of wrath are stored. He has loosed the fateful lightning of his terrible sword. His truth is marching